So, welcome back to Night Flight. Wayne McRoy is back, and we are going to continue our discussion about the Black Sun. Today we have a different point of view, and it will have to do with cosmology. So, welcome back, Roy. Excuse me, Wayne.
I'm one
And
of the many Waynes that regulars the program here, so it's understandable.
Mm, can you recall the time before 2011 when we had so many channels on a daily basis? Nibiru is coming, Nibiru is coming. And then everybody was making videos and here, this is from GPL and this, and I think I found it. No, no, it's not. Then also in it was Comet Elenin. Remember that hype? Yeah.
I do.
Ah, and then of course, 2012 went by and nothing happened. I'm not saying nothing happened, but definitely we didn't collide with Nibiru, and there was no doomsday as we have seen in the movie 2012. Mm.
Yeah, or at least it's not a doomsday that we recognized when it happened. So there's a lot of people that have talked about certain aspects of 2012 and a certain time frame within 2012, right around the winter solstice. I think it was December 23rd, 2012, where there are certain people of the category of mystics in this world who said at that time a new type of a ray, a cosmic ray, hit the earth at that point and ushered in essentially what's going to manifest as a type of new age here on earth. So you do have some of the mystics in some of the occult fraternities and other places who have spoken on this, and we've definitely seen a shift in the consciousness of people since that time, haven't we? The world has transformed in a lot of different ways since 2012. Now, there's a lot of catalyzing events that have happened in the world. One of the most catalyzing was, of course, September 11th, 2001. That was a gateway event. And then later on in 2020, March 11th, 2020, we had the whole COVID scamdemic that was unleashed on the masses. Another large psyop that was a type of a gateway event. But of course, all of this was centered, those two dates were centered by this 2012 date. And many have seen where the window at that time frame, which was predicted accurately by the Mayan calendar and some other types of civilizations and cultures through the course of time, this was one of the windows that focused around this concept of the intersection of a new age with this old age, and we're going through this transitional process right now in the cycles of time. So this is what they talk about, and of course the ancient astronaut theorists had a lot to say about this and have connected this to this planetary body that they call Nibiru or Planet X, or it's been called a lot of different things. And of course, this attaches back to the old stories of the Anunnaki. And this has been popularized in pop culture through different shows like Ancient Aliens on History Channel and through movies and stuff like this. And this was all written about very heavily by Eric von Däniken and Zachariah Sitchin and others of that sort. They popularized this idea. Now, this idea goes back a long time. If you go back and you look at the old manuscripts and stuff that we have from that time frame that talk about this concept of the Anunnaki and stuff like that, we have these connecting dots that go back through these old mythologies that seem to point in certain directions. And of course, they've speculated on the appearance of this planetary body in our solar system and near the Earth that would be a catalyzing event. And you still have people today who talk about there's got to be a planet 10, as they refer to it in this solar system. They've seen, even in a lot of the astronomical configurations of things, the people that look at astronomy and try to calculate out gravitational masses and stuff like that, they say that there's missing mass out there, that there has to be this planet that's missing, that we don't see or we haven't found yet. And a lot of people will attach the idea of Nibiru to that. So certainly there are all of these interesting connections, and there's always that tie back to the black sun, as we had talked about in a previous episode here. We had talked about some of the concepts about the black sun and what it is exactly the Nazis were looking for with this. And we could get a little more esoteric with those types of things, because if you look back in like the Rosicrucian cosmology and stuff like that, you find a lot of more interesting tie-ins to the idea, and how perhaps some of this has been misconstrued through the course of time and attached to an actual physical detectable planetary body or some such thing that may or may not be out there in the greater solar system. I don't know. I don't have the answers, but I could tell you what it is that they've taught through their secret doctrine through the course of time, and how it relates to some of these things that have been implanted into the public consciousness by pop culture in such venues as the History Channel's Ancient Aliens and other places. That show's been on air for over 20 years now. Did you realize that? I didn't realize that until just a couple days ago, that it's been on the air for that long. It's had a pretty good run. And there's a reason for that. I mean, they have beautiful cinematography. They talk about interesting topics. And the way they present the ideas, they've mastered the art of rhetoric. So combining that stuff together, you have an interesting program that people like to watch and learn some things about. And they do back up some of what they say with old accounts and old mythologies and scriptures and things like that. And then they do show some scientific evidences. But some of it, like everything else, gets a little misconstrued, and you have to have a little bit of discernment to navigate through that. But certainly, they're talking about things that matter and things that should be in the forefront of public consciousness, but for some reason they still are not. Things like disclosure about the potential existence of alien life forms and what that could look like and how that could manifest and what actually that is. And we've had this concept over the course of the past 2 years or so. They've been dancing around and skirting around this notion of disclosure in government forms of officialdom and stuff like that. They had congressional hearings where they had outright had witnesses come out and say, yes, we have a back engineering program of alien technologies, and we've seen alien bodies and have had them too. This was disclosed in the congressional record now here in the US, and that's a pretty big deal. But nothing's ever come of it, and nothing is going to come of it, because that's just the nature of how they do this. Because behind the scenes, there's a different group that's really running roughshod with this stuff that doesn't fill it in the rest of the public about it. It's kind of the concept of a breakaway civilization, as Richard Dolan has talked about in the past. I think he's correct with that assessment. It's a type of breakaway civilization. Some people would call it the deep state or the shadow government or some combination of those certain things. And certainly there's this black budget and this black money that goes on behind the scenes, and who knows where that goes. We don't have a view into that because it's all very sketchy, and they use different areas like, oh, I don't know, the Ukraine maybe to launder money through for some of these programs that they operate. And we don't really have any accountability or traceability for that. So they use other things as a cover to do stuff, to funnel these monies to. And they have these technologies they've developed in secret. And who are these people, and why is it that we continue to just let them get away with it? And this is part of the problem, and this creates the whole dynamic that's going on in the world today. So in the meantime, we have political theater going on here in the US. Trump just got elected back into the presidency, and of course that's having a ripple effect throughout the world, and that's all anyone's talking about and focusing on. Well, in the meantime, behind the scenes, you have these power players in this world that are doing things that we have no clue what they're doing. They're funneling monies away from the regular masses of the public towards these different programs they have. Some could say maybe there's some secret space programs going on. I don't know. That's some of the claims that have been made. I don't doubt that that's a possibility, that there's other things they're doing. They're trying to instantiate their position in this world in places of power and authority, even more so than they have in the past. And they're all about setting up this new technocratic control grid that they seem to want to get in place. And of course, Trump is their guy to get it done, because most of the people are unaware that he's buddy with guys like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. Well, he's been pretty public with Elon Musk, but these guys are technocrats by definition. They have access and control to these billion-dollar technology corporations that want to do things like implant brain chips in your head and build spaceships and all of this other science fiction sounding stuff. But they're the ones that seem to have a lot of sway and influence now because they got their guy in office in this position. And the people, by and large, are clueless about all of this background stuff that has been going on for a long time. And this is wherein we have to be concerned about things. Because, like I said, they most sincerely want to set up this technocratic control grid here in this world. And they want everybody to have a digital ID complete with your credit score, your social credit score, your biometric information, everything about you, your genomics in one centralized utility. And of course, they're going to attach that to the money system through this digital currency, these central bank digital currencies. And that's one of the reasons why we're seeing economic distress throughout different areas of the world and why they keep funneling money away to some of these big conflicts going on in the world, and why probably some of these conflicts have started in the first place, because it's a type of infighting at the top as to who's going to be running the big system. So
Yeah.
when you look at it from that perspective, it always ties back to, first of all, this technocrat agenda, which ties directly to transhumanism. And it's got its roots back in the occult, of course. And I think that's demonstrable. And we could show that 7 Ways to Sunday. But the thing is, we have these other topics of interest that definitely play their part in that most people aren't looking at or considering right now. And of course, Planet X, or this Nibiru factor, falls into that, because this has to do with cosmology. What is the cosmology that these quote unquote elites of the world believe in? What do they think is really going on? What do they know that we don't know that's going on? How does this relate to perhaps some type of other beings that exist in the cosmos that we have no clue about? We have to ask these questions, and it's okay to ask questions, and it's okay to ponder different kinds of answers about that, and look at what we could see. Look at all the sources of information that are available to us, and that, of course, includes the writings of some of these secret society groups and some of the old occult principles and old natural sciences, alchemy and the like, that they have in their written records. So when we peruse all of that stuff, we could see how the dots begin to align and connect in certain ways. Now, I don't know the true nature of all of this, certainly not, but I could tell you what they have believed and passed down through the secret society groups about these things. And we could see what's in the popular culture right now and what seems to align with our modern scientific view of things. And we could speculate about that stuff, and perhaps we could see what others have said about this, what they know, what they've experienced themselves. And we could all agree there's something big going on in the background. And we don't have a clue as to what that is. They keep us distracted with theater, political theater, and they want to try and keep us entertained with the old Roman model of bread and circuses. Give us just barely enough to eat, enough of a subsistence living to keep us quiet and give us plenty of entertainment options, and then we won't rebel, or we won't ask the important questions, and they could quietly put forward their agendas through the course of time. And that's what we witness today going on.
Yeah.
Now, it kind of sounds like ramblings away from the main topic, but it all relates. And that's the whole point. It all is related, and we'll connect the dots as we go on. But that's like I said, I know I sounded like I was rambling a little, and maybe I was. I tend to do that because that's the way my train of thought goes. So,
Yeah, but you are correct. There are so many layers of this onion. I
right.
would briefly share my um yeah, I pulled up something. It is called Planetary Linguistics. It's on Script. Yeah, names of planets. So here we will not go through all of them. Then the show is over. Here's Jupiter. Yeah. And now when we scroll down, here we have Babylonian, and it says for Jupiter, Nibiru. What do you make of that?
Well, Jupiter, there's a lot of different names associated with Jupiter in mythology. And here's the thing, a lot of these terms have been used to describe things other than the planetary bodies we're familiar with. And this is where a lot of misconstruing goes on into some of the meanings of different things. But I find that interesting. Jupiter, Nibiru, there's a connection there for sure. And we see that connection. And a lot of this, I think, has to do with, like I said, some of the old Rosicrucian concepts that I've been looking at recently. It's all about their cosmo-conception, their conception of the cosmology of things. So when they're talking about Jupiter, they may not be talking about what you think as far as like a planetary body or some such thing. It's a symbol representing something else. And that might be the same thing for this Nibiru thing. So maybe there is a corresponding planetary body out there. Maybe there's not. But the important point is it's the symbol itself that's important to affecting human consciousness. And that's why they've promoted this out there. And this has to do with not necessarily a planetary body of sorts named Jupiter, but it has to do with a time period, as described by the Rosicrucians, called the Jupiter period, which is the next step in human evolution. So once again, there's always these ties back to the transhumanist ideology as well. So in order to unpack that a little more, what you need to understand about what's described by some of these occult fraternities and secret society groups, you have to understand what they believe has happened through the course of time, what our real history has been. And they don't disclose this readily to the public. And it's a different way of thinking than what we're accustomed to in our scientific nomenclature. But what's described in the Rosicrucian system, I think, is the best roadmap we have to understand what they describe as our ancient cosmology. Now, they say that there are these grand periods of time. There's different periods, and each of these periods has corresponding cycles called revolutions within them. Now, there's 7 of these different time periods in the Rosicrucian model. The first one is called the Saturn period. And this is where you get some of the misconstruing of the planetary bodies that take on these same names with these concepts. Now, it's an ideological concept, it's a symbolic concept, and the planetary energies may have some type of a connection to that, but it's not referring to the planet itself. And this is where I think a lot of misconceptions have been adopted by those who have been studying this stuff, because a lot of people would claim now, looking back, that the original sun in our solar system was Saturn. And I don't think that's the case. It's a misnomer, and that's based upon a misunderstanding of these teachings of the occult fraternities, because it uses the same name, much like the old science of alchemy will use the same name for different ideas that don't represent that physical component that is actually used as the name of the symbol, like mercury. They're not talking about literal mercury, sulfur, or salt. They're not talking about those literal substances. They could use it as a symbol representing a certain concept with a different substance and have the same type of desired information stream with that. It's the same thing with these concepts of planetary bodies. So the first time period that the Rosicrucians talk about is the Saturn period, which is followed by the Sun period, followed by the Moon period, and then followed by the Earth period, which they say we are in now. Then after the Earth period, we have the Jupiter period, then the Venus period.
No Mars period.
No more. There's reasons for that too, and maybe we'll get into that. It's interesting. It's fascinating stuff. But after the Jupiter period, there's the Venus period, and then the Vulcan period, and that should be an interesting concept to those fans of Star Trek out there, simply because of the connection to all of this, because that has to do with what will be the highest state through this cycle of the evolution of mankind in these different eras, these different time periods. Now, within each corresponding time period, there's a corresponding revolution, they say, of these 7 periods. And they say right now, we exist in the Earth period. We're at the halfway point of the Earth period. So we're halfway through the Earth revolution in the Earth period. And this is where we begin the ascent back towards divinity, according to their teachings. So things will begin to get really weird and look really different from what we're accustomed to during this time frame. Now, I like to recommend people to look at a book called The Rosicrucian Cosmoconception by Max Heindel, because he actually shows little diagrams and charts explaining what the Rosicrucian viewpoint is and what they believe. So there's different levels of physicality that these worlds become manifest in. There's different layers. There's like 7 different layers through which this stuff travels. And what they claim is this is the journey of the divine spirit, or the divine virgin spirit, into matter and then back away from matter, back towards divine source. This is the journey we take, according to the Rosicrucians. And right now we are on the lowest plane that there is. They call this the dense chemical region, or the chemical region of the dense world. They have these 4 different worlds rather than 7, but the 7 periods travel downward and then back up through these 4 different worlds in their cosmoconception. It gets a little confusing if you're not familiar with it. That's why I find Heindel's charts that he has in the book very helpful for understanding this, because this is what they claim. I don't know as to the truthfulness of this. There are some things that sound reasonable and logical about it, and there's other things that I definitely have some issues with, because they don't ever actually really explain how they know this information or got this information, because they talk about these time periods of the past that there's no way to prove nor disprove that they were here. And this has to do with the evolution of mankind as well. So their claim, just to get back on point here, is we exist at the halfway point in all of this, and that we're at the lowest point that there is on the grand scale of evolution in their terms. And evolution predates Darwin by a good long time with this stuff. So that's one of the things that's been hijacked by the cult of scientism today and brought forward in different ways that don't truly represent what the old teachings were, but they've tried to engraft those into the hyper-physical paradigm. So I know I may be speaking a little bit here and maybe losing some people on this if they're newer to these concepts, but if you go back and you look and you study, you can understand some of these concepts as they're presented in this system. And that's a great book to start with to understand the conception here, because Max Heindel breaks it down really well. So it's interesting to think about. So he says that the different globes of the different periods manifest certain facets of the life wave in certain ways. And right now we are at our human phase, wherein we will now begin to ascend to something beyond human, evolve into the next step of humanity. And this has to do with what they call the divine hierarchies, or what's recognized as spiritual hierarchies in religious and mythological contexts and philosophical viewpoints that have been talked about. Things like in the Bible, they refer to them as thrones, cherubim, seraphim, angels, archangels. All of these things have been named in these different sources, and they are said to play a part in their role in helping the human being to evolve, to manifest his individuation, and to proceed from there to the next step. Now, it is said that the humans, the ones that were human in the previous period, the moon period, are now the angels that we would recognize in this period. And they work towards helping us to attain our evolution while they go through their own evolutionary process. That's different. It's on a different level. It's at a different vibratory rate. It's at a different frequency. It's at a different planar level, which transcends this one. Now, to understand this a little further, like I said, they have the concept of these 4 different worlds. There's the world of thought. There's this physical world that we're familiar with. And there's different ascending and descending levels through all of those. So they say that the next step in our human evolution has to do with the concept still of the physical plane in which we live. Like I said, they said we are at our densest point where we exist in the chemical region of the dense world. There's another subplane here that they call the etheric plane, or the ethereal world, or ethereal realm, or the ethereal portion of the physical plane. This is where we will go to next. So we're going to see things begin to really shift in our reality. And this has been described by like the new agey cults and stuff like that, and all the woo-woo crowd out there, as we're changing our frequency, we're going to ascend to the next frequency, and this kind of thing. Now, there is a core tenet to that attaches to this idea, but they've turned it into total fringe, lunatic, nut-like stuff with this new age movement. It was designed to make this stuff have a bad name or put a bad implication to it, because here's the big kicker with all of this. There are those in positions of power in this world that have a vested interest in keeping us attached to this physical chemical region of the physical plane here. They want us to be totally focused in materiality, hypermaterialism, the hypermaterial paradigm, as I like to call it. Now,
and why?
What was that?
And why do they want that?
Because they think they could become the gods of this place.
Okay.
Do that they want to be the gods of this place in no uncertain terms, and they don't think that it's in their best interest to let the bulk of humanity to ascend to this next level. So what they want to do is they want to keep us bound and focused in the hyper-materialist paradigm. Now, Rudolf Steiner warned us about this. He said that this was the spirit of Ahriman in manifestation, where you're attached to this hyperphysical paradigm. You think in terms of only the physical reality, of cause and effect relationships in physical reality. This is the same mode of thinking that will tell us that consciousness is nothing more than the byproduct of the electrochemical reactivity of the brain and brainstem. This is how they want us to think, because they want us bound in physicality, because then we are easily malleable and controllable, and we do not ascend to that next level and see those dark occultists at the top in this world right now. They want to go to that place where they ascend to the next level and they are godlike in comparison to us, and they want to rule over us for their own nefarious and greedy reasons. So they want us bound in that state, and that's exactly what this whole advent of transhumanism boils down to. Now, I know it's a lot to take in this short time period we're speaking of this stuff in, and there's so much more context I could add to this, but it would take many, many hours to do so. But we're just touching on some of the key points here. So this, to get back on topic, sorry, I tend to ramble a little and wander because it's all interrelated and there's so much there. But what this has to do with is this concept of Nibiru, and you've attached it firmly to Jupiter. I don't think it's about a planetary body in space. You see, to those dark occultists, it's a symbol of something else. It's a symbol to the attainment of this next level of evolution where they become godlike, but they don't want to take us all with them into their quote unquote new age. They have no place in their new age for the profane, and that's you and I. So they only want to have the power firmly in the grasp of a certain small group. And they want to still be able to manifest in physicality here in this chemical region as described by the Rosicrucians, but still have those godlike qualities that the rest of the masses do not, so that they could lord over us how they see fit for their own reasons. Now, I don't know exactly what all of those reasons are as to why they want to do this, because I don't think the same way these psychopaths do. So there's no way I could know what their true motives are. We could speculate about that, but certainly it has to do with this apotheosis concept that's been so prevalent in some of the old philosophical teachings. So that being the case, they want to deify themselves into this position of power and become essentially the gods of this place, what has been regarded in the past as the gods, the little g gods of this place, were some of these divine hierarchies according to the Rosicrucians and according to some of the other secret society groups. You see, they are just the humanity of a past period that has evolved to the next state or a state beyond that. And they have been able to influence the evolution of mankind here in this Earth period. And that's what the claim is. Now, all of these things do come to a close at certain points. And after they come to a close, there's a period of rest in between the different manifestations of these various worlds throughout, or these various globes throughout the Rosicrucian system. And this is called the cosmic night. And there's a corresponding break in the revolutions within each of the periods as well that corresponds to this cosmic night. Now, this is the time of pure potential, whereas when we are actively like physically doing stuff here, much like day and night. They use the comparison to day and night. Daytime, you're active, you're doing stuff. Nighttime, you're resting. That's pure potential. You're rejuvenating your body. Your body is reproducing it, whatever's necessary for itself, and repairing itself and healing and stuff like that. They say this cosmic night period corresponds to that. So at some point, they say the physicality that we have here, it will dissolve back into chaos. And then after a period of rest, a new manifestation or a new day of manifestation, that's the term they use in the Rosicrucian system, will happen. And in that system, then the cycles of evolution will repeat themselves in various stages. And mankind in that next phase will be equivalent to what the angels in this phase are, and so on and so forth, in this different stepping up of the divine hierarchies. So that's what they envision as the Jupiter period, which comes after the Earth period. But before we get to that period, we have the Jupiter revolution in the Earth period is next. So this is going to be slightly different, where human beings that we are now will have different abilities, will become slightly elevated at that phase. And by the way, I have no idea how long these revolutions or periods or anything are supposed to last. From what they say, they're very, very slow because nature moves very, very slowly, does not do things really rapidly or quickly because of how it operates, because it's more interested in manifesting perfection rather than manifesting fast change or adaptable change. It adapts very slowly. So it seems to me that these people in positions of power in this world, these dark occultists who run things here and seem to understand some of these concepts, they want to fast track the whole thing. And that's wherein it gets a little sketchy. So they're trying to push really hard because they see within their grasp the ability to attain this next evolutionary phase themselves through the use of mankind's technologies that he's developed, and do what they call self-guided evolution and go to that next step, that next phase, that Jupiter revolution for themselves, with the rest of us still left behind in the physical paradigm here, and be able to still rule and lord over us in that time frame that they're thinking of. They want to do this quickly because they're impatient and they think they can pull it off. And this is wherein we begin to see this push towards transhumanism. And most people don't even really see it just yet because it's not something that's been mainstreamed into the public lexicon right now. But transhumanism is the next thing that's going to be the big thing on the world stage very soon, I assure you. And it'll all have to do with this technocratic control grid that they want to set up. And certainly, I think that's what most of this actually relates to when they're speaking of Jupiter or Nibiru, the return of Neberu, and this kind of a concept. So I know that's a mouthful and it's a lot of information to take in, but I'd like to hear your take and what direction you want to go with this, because sometimes there's so much information in my head I want to share.
Yeah.
I don't have a linear path to do it.
Okay. So if I understood correctly, the advent of transhumanism in their mind is the Jupiter revolution.
Essentially, yeah, that's what
Oh,
I have come to realize or to accept as the probable truth as to what their motivation is. But it's
Mm,
only for a select few, and
yeah.
that's the problem.
Yeah, I totally agree that the New Age was more or less launched by the secret societies to distract people, definitely. And it also corresponds what I have learned in my interviews with Gary Wayne, that at the end of the day, it always boils down to becoming God yourself.
Yeah, that's sadly what it's all about with all of these secret society groups and mystery schools and all of that stuff, and even this technocratic push towards transhumanism. It's the same kind of thing going on. It's always focused on that. And as much as people would like to deny it, and as much as I wish it wasn't the case, it always, always, always ties back to the occult every time. So that's the uncomfortable truth with it.
Um, in your research, do you think that the secret societies have one coherent cosmology, or, are there certain overlaps, or are they completely different?
There are commonalities in all of them. There's a lot of overlaps. They all teach some of the same basic premises or ideas, but some of them have twisted and contorted what's been taught through the course of time. And then when you get to the modern era of what we would call modern occultism, many of the ideas have been twisted and turned upside down on their heads. And we have this advent from the secret society groups themselves of this new age movement. And what it's designed to do is totally steer people off the path, put them in complete inversion of what the truth is, and mislead them and misdirect them and look silly and nonsensical so that the bulk of humanity rejects anything that they're preaching or talking about. And they turn to science as their savior, as the god of the new age, or more rightly, scientism, because that's what has been adopted by and large here as the god of the new age. So, that being the case, this leads people directly into this mindset of hypermaterialism or hypermateriality, the hypermaterial paradigm, the spirit of Ahriman, as described by Rudolf Steiner, where you're focused strictly on physical manifestation here, physical reality in this dense chemical region, and nothing else is true. This disregards all spiritual concerns, disregards all of these other layers of reality that interpenetrate this reality we live in, and
Yeah,
focuses in the paradigm here.
yeah, you can see that even, and I'm not saying they are doing a bad job. You have plenty of YouTube channels, and a lot of them are very, very successful, where they regurgitate 3D news and look at what is happening on a daily basis in politics, what have you. And they are very, very successful. But those channels like yours or mine, I'm such a small potato, that are trying to peel off the layers, what is behind that, because that is not the end all be all. Yeah, that is not so interesting to most people. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. It's a very niche type audience that we have. It's a niche audience.
Mm.
And it's only people that really could see through the different layers of the onion and know there's something more at the center. And that's what I'm focused on. I want to know not only how do they do the things they do, why do they do the things they do? And this is the most important thing to understand. And most people don't care about that. They're stuck in that hyper physical, that hyper material paradigm way of thinking. They'll say, if you want to get to the truth or the core of what's going on in this world, all you have to do is follow the money. Now, that's true to a certain degree
Yeah.
on the strictly veneer or surface level. But behind all of that, there's ideologies that run really deep. And there's a lot of these different levels that have occult ties to them that run really deep. And this is where most people only begin to scratch the surface on that. It's like if you want to look at what's been going on in society, there's a lot more people that claim to be awake now than what there have been. but they still buy into the two-party political system. They think that going out and voting for their guy is going to fix things this time. And they can't look past that. They claim to be awake. They claim to understand what's going on. They claim to be able to know that there's different agendas going on in this world and that there's some evil forces at play and dark things at play. But yet they still only look at the surface level stuff. And this is wherein we're missing the point. And there's been a lot who have misdirected people with good intentions with this surface level stuff. It's distraction. Like the whole political thing going on in the world right now, that's all distraction. Like everybody here in the US is still festering over this election cycle. And it's like it doesn't matter. Don't you understand? Whoever the puppet is, they're still a puppet. It doesn't matter who you vote for. If your guy wins or not, they're still going to roll forward their agendas. And I'm talking, of course, this group that you would refer to as like the shadow government, the deep state, the Illuminati, whatever you want to call them behind the scenes, this breakaway civilization. They're still going to do the things that benefit them and promote their own agendas and put them in the position they want to be in. They don't care about the public at large. They only care about us in terms of human resources. They look at us as little more than cattle for their use and manipulation.
Yeah.
Let's be honest about it. And that's the thing most people can't seem to get past. They think somehow or another these people in positions of power in this world are just like you and me. And the politicians, they go and they have our best interests in mind and they represent us. And the politicians play such a little part in all of it. And that's what people don't understand. Actual governments have little to do with governance. And there's a big distinction to be made there.
I agree to a certain degree because I think a lot of people have reached a point where they would, be relieved to have some people in government who have some common sense left. Because here in Germany, for instance, it's completely out of the door. And, it you will have different experiences depending on who is running the show. Yeah. For instance, Sweden had no lockdowns. Yeah. And on it goes. Yeah. Here in Germany, I mean, oh my goodness, that was like, driving on a one-way street but from the other direction, everybody had ended the measures and Germany was still going strong with it. So to say they have absolutely no impact on what you are experiencing is not completely correct, but I agree on a deeper level, yeah, of course. But to have some people with some common sense, it would make a little bit of a difference.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you on that point. Certainly, we have what's represented here. You see, these political figures are a symbol representing an ideal that we have for our society and culture at large. So, yeah, people with more common sense that will have a bit more of an impact on the greater culture when they're in a position like that. That I do see and agree with. What I'm saying overall is the overarching larger agendas will still push forward. Now, they may not proceed as quickly or in the same exact way as they would if somebody else was pushing it, but they still move forward, even if it's incrementally slow. Now, I would say that sometimes they have to slow their roll a little bit, or sometimes they have to speed it up. And whoever gets shifted into this position of power will represent one team or the other, because there is infighting at the topmost levels in this world for these people that run things. So, that being the case, sometimes the political leader does have his role or her role in that regard, but the agenda is still going to move forward. Let's put it that way. It always does.
I found something here. It is called Occultopedia, and it talks here about the black sun. But there was one paragraph that I found a little bit confusing. Here it says their belief was 500 million years ago, the elder race, in brackets, the Aryans or the Elohim. So is he now saying Aryans and Elohim is two different words for the same thing?
Well,
That is,
it's
yeah, oh, wait a bit. That is one question. And then he continues, began to colonize our solar system as theirs in the star system of Aldebaran became uninhabitable. Marduk, allegedly a planet that existed in what is today the asteroid belt, was the first to be colonized. Mass colonization quickly followed, and when they came to Earth, these Aryans were known as the Sumerians.
now this is where somebody has taken some of the older writings about some of these past versions of humanity and some of these old occult ideas and has completely misconstrued them and adapted them into a science fiction type of a
Okay.
conceptualization here.
Yeah.
That's what I'm seeing when I read this, because they're taking disparate bits of information from some of the old occult systems and reapplying them into this physical paradigm. See, that's why we have this push for ideas like Nibiru and the Anunnaki and the return of the Anunnaki to Earth in a physical form, like these physical extraterrestrials that come here. There's the push for this when it seems to me more likely that anything that we might refer to as aliens is more of an extra dimensional or a spiritual type of an entity. It exists in a different type of manifestation than what we can actually conceptualize or understand or relate to in our physical integration here. So you have this way of thinking permeating into even some of these old occult ways of thinking, where they want you to focus on the hyper materialist paradigm. So they're telling you, yeah, all this talk about these spiritual things of the past, well, it's just all aliens and it's all different planets, and they came here and they colonized and stuff like that. But that's not the case at all when you actually get back into looking at this. Once again, this falls back to the secret doctrine that underlies and undergirds all of these different occult groups. Now, they teach that within what I was talking about with this Rosicrucian system, through these periods of time, the evolution of mankind goes on to these different levels. Now, it is said that the Lemurian race, this former iteration of mankind, arose in the late moon period. Now, that was the period preceding the Earth period here. And that through the various revolutions, first you had the Saturn revolution of the Earth period, then the Sun revolution of the Earth period, then the Moon revolution of the Earth period. And now we're in the Earth revolution of the Earth period right now. We're halfway through that. Now, during this time frame, between the end of the moon period, when the Lemurian race first emerged, they began to manifest as a type of proto-humanity in the earlier phases of this Earth period that we're in now. And they eventually evolved in the next revolution to the Atlantean race. Now, they refer to this as there's 16 overall races that they will acknowledge of humanity, okay, in the Rosicrucian system. And they call these the 16 points of destruction. And this is an interesting concept to think about. So they have these 16 different iterations of the races. They went through various phases in the Lemurian stage, and then the Atlanteans went through 7 different iterations. And then after the Atlanteans, there arose different racial groups that we recognize today. And one of the most important ones were the Aryan race. Now,
Mm.
this is probably where they're getting the idea from. And this, of course, has everything to do with Nazism and with all of this association with the Jews and everything else. All of this Aryan stuff ties back to their secret doctrine. Now, they say that this Aryan group was a left over, a remnant of that past Atlantean race that did not evolve in the same order with the rest of humanity. And that's why they look down on some of these different groups in that way. And it's been associated with the Jews. And that's why there's all of this anti-Semitism and stuff like that that goes on, because this is how they view it in the secret doctrine, that this is one of the groups or the races here that's a holdout before all of these different aspects of race disappear. And what the claim is when their souls or within this racial group came into individuation, they applied too much of their characteristics and too much of their focus on the racial characteristics, and thus they got stuck in this hyper-physical paradigm. And this is wherein the idea comes from of a lot of this stuff. So they're saying it's this one group that falls into that category because they've attached their identity so much to their racial qualities. This is what they teach in Rosicrucianism, okay? You could agree with it, disagree with it, whatever. I don't necessarily buy into all of it, but this is what's taught, and this is the component that's missing in a lot of things today, because all racism falls back on this secret doctrine, and that there's different divisions of mankind. There's these 16 races that will manifest. Now, they say that right now we have, what do they call it? The proto European something or another. There's different designations they have for this. I would have to look at. I haven't read on this in a while now, but there's different racial groups that they say are already concurrently going on. But there's also going to emerge two more races in this Earth revolution of the Earth period. And then after that, in the next phase, in the Jupiter period, in the Jupiter revolution, then race will disappear as a thing, and there will be just one humanity once again. It's the rise of these races that they say are part of the evolutionary process. And what happens is when these different periods occur and these different revolutions occur, they have, throughout the course of evolution here, they acknowledge that people evolve at different speeds, different levels, out of different sorts of necessity, and that some will be left behind and others may advance quicker than others. And there's always what they call stragglers and newcomers in any life wave. So they see this Aryan group as the stragglers, the ones that will wind up left behind. They won't evolve with the rest of humanity. So essentially, it seems to me what's going on is these dark occultists who understand these things at the top are trying to lump everybody together into this group that just kind of stays put, stuck in the hyperphysical paradigm. Well, only a small group evolves to the next level rather than the bulk of humanity. And they're trying to trap us there with that. So they use some of these ideas in leveraged ways against us. So I know it's a lot. It's a lot to take in, and there's so much more. And I'm probably doing a poor job describing it, but there's so much. So it runs so deep. But they're saying, at any rate, there's two other races that are going to arise now, and one of them is going to come from America. So that's where the next phase, according to the occultists here, the Rosicrucians, America is going to be the springboard for this next evolved race of humanity that elevates. And then there's also, they say that this other race that's going to occur in this revolution will be the Slavs, first of all, and then Russians. The Russian race will evolve in this way and become prominent races. And I find this interesting too because of all the events going on in Ukraine and Russia, and it ties back to this. So those are the two other races that need to manifest here before we get the totality of the 16 races or the 16 points of destruction that must occur before this evolutionary process takes place to the next step here. And there's all kinds of other stuff attached to this too, like how the existence of moons in a system means that there's a stagnation in a portion of the life wave. And therefore, if you have a moon, if it's a planet with a moon, there's a stagnation in the life wave, and some people are going to be left behind in that evolutionary phase. These are the things they teach in the Rosicrucian Brotherhood, only to those high enough adepts who actually want to study this and understand this. Now, like I said, Max Heindel puts out a great book talking about this.
Okay.
And he outlines it very well. For people that are interested in learning more about this, I recommend go and read it. He lays it out pretty distinctly.
But going back to my question, do you also think that to him, Aryans and Elohim are the same? That is how I understood it, how he wrote it. He talks about this elder race and then in brackets, Aryans or Elohim. By the way, the elder race, that reminds me of the ancients in Stargate SG-1.
Yeah, amazing how all these things interrelate, right?
Yeah,
Well, it said, now this is said, this is what is said, that in the early phases of humanity, in the late Lemurian cycle, and through the different races, the 7 different racial groups through the course of the existence of Atlantis, we had little g gods who came and helped to direct mankind in his evolution and lay down laws for him and guide and direct him. Now, some of these may be what he's referring to. Now, the Rosicrucian system refers to these guys as the Lords of Venus. And this is an interesting crossover here as well. So maybe that's what he's construing with this. But you see how he's attaching the people group to the Elohim, the gods of the people group. And I don't think that's necessarily the
yeah.
connection.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I never heard that before. I found that very strange. And that
right.
is, but that was the reason why I had to ask. And yeah, believe it or not, Wayne, our first hour is gone.
That was fast.
Yeah, that was really fast. And yeah, we will see the patrons on the other side.